Hi, my name is Molly Einen, and I'm a person with narcolepsy. I was diagnosed at age 22. I'm now 58. Do the math, that's a lot of years of having narcolepsy. I don't even know anymore. I also worked at the Center for Narcolepsy Research at Stanford for Dr. Mignot for 17 years. And through my work at Stanford, I had the opportunity to meet thousands of people with narcolepsy from all over the world. So some of what I'm going to talk about is my own experience, but also what I've learned from talking to large swaths of people with narcolepsy over the years. I'm also going to hope to go through my slides really quickly. Please feel free to ask questions, but I'd like to get to the end of the slides more quickly so that we can workshop or strategize on perhaps solving how we can maybe improve our lives and make changes in our lives to perform so that we're performing better than we are today. Okay. I also have a disclaimer. I'm now an employee of Jazz Pharmaceuticals. I've been there almost 4 years. And the views expressed in my presentation are my own and do not reflect the opinions of Jazz. And the following content is not intended to provide medical advice and is intended for educational and discussion purposes. And I cannot answer questions about medications, so don't ask. So what is narcolepsy and what isn't it? So research shows that people with narcolepsy live a normal lifespan. I managed the brain donation program at Stanford, and many people were well into their 90s before they were donating their brains. It's not a degenerative disease. Yes, the hypocretin-producing cells are destroyed, but the destruction seems to be rather isolated to those hypocretin cells, and the surrounding cells are intact and not destroyed. Once narcolepsy is stable and managed, typically it doesn't get worse. Now, does that mean you'll never have episodes in your life where it is worse? So I find that when there's changes in your life circumstances, you go from living alone to having a roommate or a partner, you go from one job to another job. When the life demands change, maybe you've had a child and now you're navigating being a parent as well as living with narcolepsy, that whenever there's these inflections or changes in life, it's almost like you have to learn all over again how to live your best life with narcolepsy. So does that mean your narcolepsy's gotten worse? I don't think so. I think that just means the circumstances and the routines that had worked for you before have been necessarily changed, and you have to find your new normal to find your best self. And yet, even though narcolepsy is stable and shouldn't get worse, these research studies have shown significant impacts to the health-related quality of life, psychosocial impacts, economic burden, and usual activity and vitality are impaired. Factors impacting quality of life, other than sleepiness, the other symptoms aren't really high up there on the list of things that are impacting our quality of life, but the quality of life is impacted in employment status, living with a partner, and professional advancement. So I think those are all byproducts of when we're not doing as well as we could be doing because of our narcolepsy and our narcolepsy symptoms. So it's not always cataplexy prevented me from advancing in my job, but the overall burden of the disease may make it harder to advance in some of these areas or living with a partner. So I wanted to give a few hints about interacting with your doctor, just because I saw a lot of people interacting with doctors, and I saw some things that didn't work as well, and then I saw some things that did work well. So prepare for your visit. Make a list of items to discuss with your doctor. Prioritize the list with 3 to 5 things that are most important, and only talk about those at each visit. When people came with long lists and 40, 50 pages of paperwork, the doctors tended to ignore all of it, and then they hear what they hear is the most important symptom to you. Versus if you prioritize what are the 3 to 5 areas that are the most difficult or the most challenging for you, and then it's more crystal clear to the doctor of what aspect of your narcolepsy, because it's multifaceted, what aspect of your narcolepsy is most impacting your life that you want to address at that point in time. And over the years and over time, you can address that more full list, but prioritize that list and concentrate on the things that are impacting your life most negatively, versus if you're talking, if hallucinations are something that you experience each night and it's confusing, and you go down the rabbit hole of explaining that to your doctor, but it's not impacting your day-to-day life, the doctor may think that those hallucinations are the most important thing to address treating, when in fact it may be, for you, some other aspect of your life. Also quantify so they understand. Many doctors, and myself, I know when I used to go to my doctor in my early years, I loved my doctor. He was wonderful. And I wanted him to feel better. So every visit I would go and I would say, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing about the same. And saying about the same, the doctor may interpret that checking the box of, oh, they're fine. They're doing the same. Well, the same may be, I'm still falling asleep at every red light. I'm taking 3 or 4 naps a day. I'm falling asleep 4 or 5 times a day, nodding off when I don't want to. That's the same for you, but they don't really, have they gone back and checked the notes to see that's what you said last time? So quantify. Because even though you've become accustomed to falling asleep 4 or 5 times a day, nodding off in the school days 5 or 6 times, if you quantify that, that doctor may not write that off as, oh, they're doing fine because it's the same as they were last time they're there, and here they are, you look fine, and you survived from my last visit to this visit, so all's good. Well, that quantifying it gives the doctor a picture of how you're doing and may raise an alarm that you're not as fully treated as you should be, or that maybe something needs to shift or change in order to be doing better. And also, I would say laminate and keep copies of your past sleep records, and including your sleep studies. Because if you lose that sleep study in some fashion or another, somewhere down the road, somebody may make you take another sleep study, and it's a big burden for a person with narcolepsy to go off all their meds to do an accurate sleep study, an MSLT. Again, one shouldn't have to repeat a sleep study in the course of their narcolepsy life. And so if you have those records, save them, laminate them. I have 3 or 4 copies that I keep in various different places. Oh, and many of us, when we are in the doctor's offices, we don't even know what doses of medications we're taking, what we take. Make a list so that your doctor has the correct doses and medication list that you have. I say here, a picture's worth 1,000 words. There's this AASM sleep diary that you can find online, and I noticed that Chad had this, Dr. Roof had this in his presentation as well. It was interesting. Dr. Mignot could spend an hour, even an hour and a half with a patient and think that he understood what was going on, but those patients who would complete this sleep diary, and then we would ask patients to fax it to us every couple of weeks or so, sometimes you would see something that really hadn't become evident in the sleep discussion, in the interview and evaluation. And this particular sleep diary for people with narcolepsy is really good because you shade in any areas where you're asleep and indicate when you're awake. So if your awakenings at night are not brief but are a little bit longer, or if you're taking multiple naps a day, this picture may tell the doctor something different than what has been conveyed in that visit that you've had. Take a friend or family member along with you if possible. Take notes, ask your friend to take notes for you. I think it's hard to remember everything that a doctor has said, and it's because you're also being interviewed, so you're trying to remember and answer those questions. I think it's helpful to have somebody else there. Be brief in your descriptions and precise in your language. When we ramble, I ramble, we all ramble, don't we? Sometimes, and can go off on a tangent. Sometimes the doctor can then misunderstand what the point is that you're trying to get across. So again, try to be brief. I mean, we want to give the doctor a flavor for what's going on, but sometimes if you go on too long, then that takes up the time, and they're looking at the clock, and the interview ends, and you really haven't gotten to what's most important about how you're doing. Be clear, honest in your communication with your doctor. It's important. I used to, as I said before, I used to want my doctor to feel good, so I would always tell him I was doing well. Now, I had the ability, after I visited the doctor, 2 days later, I'd call him up and I'd fess up to how often I was falling asleep and let him know how I was really doing. But I had that sort of weird thing where I wanted him to feel good as a result of our checkup visits in the aftermath. And I honestly, I did feel good in the moment when I said that, because I usually usually had napped in the waiting room before going into the visit. And immediately after a nap, I actually do feel like $1 million. So for me, it was that perspective where I would make those calls after a day when I hadn't had a chance to take a nap and I wasn't feeling very good and I had struggled with not succeeding in that particular day. Then I would call the doctor and fess up to him. But don't do that. Be honest, and I think that's when we document and take a diary and keep track of our symptoms. That maybe helps us be more honest when we're in front of the doctor. If you ask the doctor how he prefers to communicate with you, pay attention to that, because there's some doctors who just never answer phone calls, and there's some doctors who never answer emails, and vice versa. So if your doctor lets you know how to communicate with him, follow that, and I think you'll have better luck in having that flow of communication with your doctors. And sometimes it's not the doctor, but it might be somebody else in the doctor's office who is the best point of contact to get that information to the doctor. Okay, be open to trusting your doctor has heard you and follow the recommendations. Some changes take time, don't give up too soon. Dr. Mignot had sort of a 10-day rule. Any medication or a change in dose, he really wanted you to give it 10 days or so before you gave up on something because it was too soon to give up. If you have questions, concerns, side effects, contact your doctor. It's important they know. And follow up with the doctor at the interval that the doctor asks. And then don't make changes to what the doctor has prescribed or recommended without informing them first. I think it's quite common for doctors to find out 6 months later when you have another visit that you actually only spent 3 weeks doing what they had asked and that you had made the change. And I think that's frustrating for both parties, you as a patient and then the doctor, because then the doctor's got this, well, you know, he or she didn't do what I said, no wonder they're not doing well, when that may not be the case at all. But if you communicate up front when it's happening, then they'll have more faith in you that they can either address your concerns, etc. Okay, healthy habits, sleep hygiene. Everybody familiar with sleep hygiene habits? Go to bed at the same time, wake up at the same time each day. These are sleep practices that help everyone feel better. People with narcolepsy, I think Chad called me out this morning on his talk saying that anything that makes anyone sleepy makes a person with narcolepsy sleepy times 10. Anything that helps anyone hopefully helps us as well. So those things are important. Go to bed at the same time each night and wake at the same time each morning. Exposure to bright light in the morning if possible. It's funny, Dr. Mignot saw a patient who had come from Ohio and it was winter. And he told her to take breakfast out on the porch or out on her deck. And she sent us a picture a few days later in this parka and snow, and it looked like everything was dead, because in California you can do that pretty much year-round, get out in the sunshine. And she says, not really working. So in that case, she needed a light box to get that light exposure in the morning in the wintertime. Okay. Regular daily exercise, no TV, phones, computers, they just all stay out of the bedroom. I think all of us break some of these habits at one time or another. They really do work if you can adhere to them. I'm guilty of not always following. I used to be able to stand here and say, I'm following all my own advice, but this year I've got truth-telling, I've fallen off the wagon and I'm not doing my regular daily exercise. Most important good habit, planned, regular, scheduled naps. 1 or 2 daily, sometimes 3 daily for some people, and take a nap before the nap takes you. I think we've all struggled to stay awake. And we think, oh, just another half hour, I'm gonna finish this project. But if we're doing this, that project takes twice as long. For me, if I've been doing that, I then, after I have finally taken a nap, need to go back and redo what I did to check my work and make sure it was accurate. What a waste of time. There I wasted the 30, 45 minutes doing what could have been maybe accomplished in 15 minutes, and I'm not even sure of the output of my work that I need to redo it later. Why would anybody then do that struggle? So take that nap before it takes you. We also know how tired we are from that MSLT. We can fall asleep every couple of hours and fall asleep in less than X number of minutes. So even before we're nodding off and struggling, I bet you can fall asleep. So if at 4 o'clock every day you've hit the wall and you're tired, I'm guessing you can fall asleep at 3 o'clock even though you haven't yet hit the wall. And maybe you can even do that at 2 o'clock. And if you take that nap at 2 o'clock, maybe you never hit that wall at 4 o'clock and can make it through the end of your workday or school day or whatever it is to then take another nap later on in the day. So I try to proactively nap, not wait until I get to that point where I may be nodding off, because then I'm mortified if somebody's walked by my desk and I just felt like I just did that, because I'm always trying to, put our best face on. So take the nap before the nap takes you and limit the length. Not everybody benefits from a nap, so type 1 narcolepsy, almost universally people benefit from a nap. Type 2 narcolepsy and idiopathic hypersomnia, there are some patients where a nap makes them feel worse. There are some people who are incapable of taking a nap shorter than a couple of hours. Those people who take a couple-hour nap, that's too long, and it probably cross over into something called sleep inertia, and it might actually make you more tired. I've kind of used the rule of thumb. When I take a nap, I usually wake up after about 10 minutes, and I have learned to respond. I get up as soon as I rouse. Now, on the weekend, sometimes if I've woken after 10 minutes, I can choose to readjust and take maybe another 10 minutes, and that's okay because it's the weekend and I need to recharge my battery as well. But when we take a short nap and you wake from that nap, whether you set an alarm or don't set an alarm, it's just learning how to, when you have that little brief kind of readjust and wakening, to just respond to it and get up so that the nap doesn't go on too long and cross over into sleep inertia. Okay, drink water. And here it feels like you need to drink water even more. So dehydration causes fatigue in absolutely everyone. Anything that makes anyone feel sleepy will make a person with narcolepsy feel even more sleepy, and drink water throughout the day, every day. So one of the interesting studies that came out, so shortly after the hypocretin discovery, there was a lot of basic science research done in rats and mice missing hypocretin. And they found that those rats and mice missing hypocretin do not even think to drink. And that's a very basic instinct for animals. So that to me was really interesting, because I thought, well, I'm never thirsty. I'm probably not dehydrated. Maybe we don't have that instinct that tells us we're thirsty and we need to drink. And this is when I always drink. Oops. So can't hurt. Although I said that one time and somebody said you can drink too much water and blah, blah, blah. But anyhow, so drinking water can't hurt. Take care of your teeth. Many of the medications used to treat narcolepsy cause dry mouth. Dry mouth's bad for your teeth, increases plaque and decay, and causes bad breath. Food. Small meals more often. Large meals or lots of carbohydrates can cause sleepiness. Stick with small meals and lean protein during the hours when you need to stay awake. For me, one of the tricks that works for me is, does a little hungry equal more awake? And so sometimes I'll kind of eat smaller meals and be on the edge of hungry during the day, because that helps me stay awake. But then when I'm home, it's fine to eat that bigger meal because I have that ability to take a nap. Sometimes I then also strategize my naps, knowing, well, I'm going to go ahead and eat lunch, and then I'm going to plan to take this nap shortly after that, because the eating tends to make me sleepy. But be strategic about that, and if you can work that into your plan, then that sleepiness doesn't catch you by surprise. And then hungry or tired. I know that in my earlier life with narcolepsy that I used to think I was just ravenously starving, and I would go through the cupboards grabbing anything that I could eat quickly. And then I finally kind of clued into learning that when I was thinking I was starving, I wasn't starving. I was eating 3 meals a day and living in America. That sometimes I thought I was starving when I was actually extremely sleepy. So I had changed this rule to where I'm going to go lay down and take a nap, and if I'm still hungry when I wake up, then I go ahead and eat whatever I want. But 9 times out of 10, after I would take the nap, I would kind of level set and I would feel good, and I didn't feel that same starving feeling. Did other people have that experience too? That when you're really tired, you think you're starving? Yeah, okay. Okay, weight. Rats and mice studies show that the hypocretin deficient animals actually eat less and are heavier. With too much weight gain, we can develop other comorbidities, as Dr. Roof talked about in his talk earlier today. And there's only one research study that's been done looking at diet in people with narcolepsy. And hopefully more studies will be done in the future, but this is the kind of research that's tough to get funded because there's not a lot of dollars in diet exercises, or diet therapies. But they found that a low-carb, high-protein, high-fat diet helped with wakefulness and less cataplexy. And that was done back in, what year does that say? Yeah, so that's a long time ago. So it'd be nice if they did more studies. I've heard from people, some people find that by eliminating gluten in their diet that they do better. I don't think that's universal across the road, but there are some people who've found that that's helpful, and that's great. I think I'm all for it. If somebody finds something, eliminating a food or changing their diet habits that helps their wakefulness, I think that's great. Hopefully more studies can be done in the future. Okay, strategies. Planning backwards. Over the years, people used to say to me all the time, well, I have narcolepsy, I can't be expected to be on time. And when Dr. Mignot was seeing patients, it was like, no, you gotta be on time because now you're impacting the other patients who are coming on time. So I think just like if you have a start time at work at 8 o'clock, you don't set your alarm for 7:55, right? You set the alarm so that you have time to shower and get ready and time to commute. So I take that same sort of calculation and adjustment that one would make for what time do I need to wake up so I can get to work on time, but I'm kind of doing that all the time, all day long. So if I have a commitment with a friend or people after work, or I've committed to being someplace at some time or getting a project done, I'm always doing that planning backwards, just like you would plan to get that time for a shower, dressed, and drive to work. I'm adding that time there so that I am responsible and reliable and I show up on time. So I think that and it's important. Even when I would drive into San Francisco for meetings, it's a 45-minute drive. Many days I can do the 45-minute drive, but sometimes I get drowsy and I need to pull over and take a nap. So I need to allow more than 45 minutes for that drive in the event that I need to take a nap. And if I don't take a nap, then that gives me that extra buffer time when I'm there to perhaps kick my head back and close my eyes for a few minutes before going into that meeting or obligation with friends at that time. Is somebody raising their hand? Yeah. Go ahead. Go to bed earlier. Sorry, but that's where I'm super practical about that. Is that easy? Not always easy. So I'm a bit of a night owl, like many, many people are with narcolepsy, especially if I've napped in the evening and then I all of a sudden have this energy to get something done, or there's a program I want to watch. But, well, I set an alarm to get ready for bed, and I set an alarm for when I need to get into bed. So those are part of my normal day. And over time, because my real preferred bedtime is midnight, and then I shifted it slowly, but to 11, and more recently, because I'm having many 7 and 8 o'clock meetings, I've had to shift it even a half hour earlier. Now, was it easy? No, I feel like it happens in sort of 10-minute or 15-minute increments, but we can shift that if we choose to, and it takes some work and commitment to do that. But I do think it's not uncommon for people with narcolepsy to say, but I feel my best at 1 a.m. But that is working against our own circadian system, which our bodies do perform best if we're within that same, kind of normal circadian rhythm of going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time, going to bed when the sun goes down, waking when the sun comes up. Is ideal. People with they call it shift work sleep disorder. So a person can be diagnosed with shift work sleep disorder because it messes up your sleep so much to have that shift work. And Dr. Roof also talked about in his study how sometimes people without narcolepsy get diagnosed with narcolepsy. And in that same study, the majority of those people that had that mistaken diagnosis were actually shift workers because their sleep was so dysregulated that it can cause a person to look like they have narcolepsy when they don't have narcolepsy. So sleeping in sync with your circadian rhythm, if at all possible, is important. And if you happen to be a shift worker and that's the only choice that you've got, then sleep the same schedule, even on the days that you don't work, would be important. Okay. We talked about this already. Pushing through the sleepiness rarely works well. Be a good student of yourself. You can't expect something to change or improve if you don't do something different. So if you're struggling to get up in time and you feel like you need that extra sleep, if it's not been working for you and doing whatever it is that you've been doing, don't keep trying the same thing over and over again. Maybe try to look at things through a different lens and make a different shift to see if actually changing what you're doing will make a difference. Routine, routine, routine. Now, I am ridiculously routine at the age of 58. Young people are not ridiculously routine, and that's part of the nature of being young. Or if you're a parent of young kids, life is very flexible and sporadic, and it's not always as routine as possible. But the more routine your schedule is, the more regimented you are about your sleep and wake times, even what you eat, when you eat, your body will perform better. Easier said than done, I realize that. I do think it gets easier as we get older, but it does make a difference in how we perform. Let's see. Okay, family and friends. How many people in the audience are family and friends? Okay. No one with narcolepsy wants to be told to take a nap. We all become the grumpy 2-year-old having a tantrum. I don't care if you're a 10-year-old with narcolepsy, a 50-year-old with narcolepsy, or a 30-year-old with narcolepsy. Nobody wants to be told to take a nap. So my daughter and I had an agreement. We had a code word, and when I was being the mom, because I would come home from work and I would be grumpy, and I would be tired, and all those dishes in the sink, I would that and we had this agreement when I was well rested. We had this conversation that if I was being the mom, that she could remind me that I might want to spend some time in my room, which was code for, Mom, you really need a nap. But I could accept her telling me that I might need some time in my room, which was true. But I didn't have the same visceral reaction about my teenage daughter telling me to take a nap. So I think that no matter who you are, being told to take a nap, somehow that makes us feel demeaned and put down. And that angry reaction, I think lots of people always question, I mean, I'm that grumpy narcoleptic. And sometimes when we're tired, really what we want is everybody to just shut up and do everything our way, because we have no energy or tolerance to hear anything else. And that makes us not the nicest person in the world, but family and friends, if you can understand that, when we are in that moment where we just want everybody to shut up and do everything our way, don't try to have a discussion about, don't you think maybe a nap would help you feel better? Or how can I help you? Because then you're going to get yelled at. And I thought long and hard about this because I used to get asked about this grumpiness and behavior problems all the time. And I think I finally came to the conclusion that if you're spitting mad and grumpy and grouching, you can't coincidentally be falling asleep. So in a weird way, although it's not a successful coping mechanism, being angry and mad and grumpy and stomping your feet and having a tantrum is keeping you awake in the moment. But family and friends, it's not the best time to discuss with your loved one how they can better manage their symptoms. Okay. So have those conversations when entirely rested, how you can help each other. No need to explain, let me explain what I mean. I have this in here because when I was about to go back to work again, there was a period of time where I'd sort of hit the wall with my narcolepsy not being well controlled, and then I had been in a clinical trial, I was doing better, and I was about to go back to work, and I was talking to a therapist, and I was lamenting about this. Well, how do I tell my new employer that I may need a nap? And I was going on, kind of really worried about that. I was anxious about that. How am I going to manage this? How am I going to navigate that? And one of those aha moments, I don't know if anybody else has been to a therapist, but rarely did they occur, but when they occur, they're these big aha moments. And she said, well, you don't owe anybody an explanation of why you might need some flexibility in your schedule. So she said, you could be dropping a child off at daycare or a school or caring for an elderly parent, but if you need a longer break at a certain time, you don't need to explain, you just need to ask for that. And they aren't entitled to an explanation. So we don't always have to explain why we need what we need, and if it's within the realm of you're still accomplishing, getting your job done and putting in the time that you need to put in to do your job, we don't necessarily have to tell them why we want this accommodation. Does that resonate with people? Does that make sense? For me, that was a big aha moment. You mean I don't have to explain myself and tap dance and feel guilty? Baby steps can lead to making big changes over time. It's okay to ask for help or tell others what you need. And then hardwire your brain to be happy. I think I wake up every day hopeful that I'm going to get this list of things done, and almost every single day I fail at getting that list of things done, but I wake up with sort of a positive attitude towards getting it done. So I think we also need to realize everybody fails at something every day, not just those of us with narcolepsy, but sometimes it can feel hard. It's hard when you can't stay awake. It's hard when you can't do what it seems like other people can do. But if we can hardwire our brain to see the successes that we have in our day, I think that can help us continue to be positive about making it through the next day. Okay. So, a goal without a plan is just a wish. How are we doing for time? Okay. So what I wanted to talk about here is, we've talked about these healthy habits, we've talked about lifestyle changes, but now it's like, well, how do we make these changes? And I think we need to make a decision to act or change a behavior. Not I'm going to exercise for an hour every day from now on going forward, but maybe I'm going to start exercising. So here I put some examples of things that might be things that you're struggling with. I'm struggling with EDS at work, and my doctor suggested scheduling a nap. That might seem overwhelming. I understand exercise might help my sleepiness, but exercise is the last thing I want to do. My friends and families offer to help when they can see I'm struggling. Okay. So those are things that maybe maybe one of those things resonates with you. So what should we do? Let's identify something to work on in the short term. So set a goal. So if it's exercise, for example, maybe find a friend who also wants to exercise and be more active as well. Find a friend, and twice a week plan to go for a 1 mile walk with that friend, and set a time frame for doing that. You're going to do it for a month. You're going to do it for 2 weeks. So make it time bound, and then have a specific goal. Make it something that's measurable. Make it attainable. Don't make it be such a big goal that it's impossible to attain. Make it relevant to helping the behavior or the change in your lifestyle that you're attempting to make, and then have these intervals where you measure whether you've been successful or not, and then reward yourself if you've accomplished that, and then maybe make the next baby step and the next change and add on to that. Okay, and then does the change or habit seem like a chore? So I think we need to sometimes take that change or habit and reframe it. When I am not exercising and no longer even desiring to exercise, it does feel like a chore. So I have to find a way of like, Molly, you'll feel better overall if you start doing that, and you'll have more flexibility and less aches and pains. I need to find lots of good reasons to do that and not look at the part of where starting an exercise routine is hard. And then compare the pros and cons. And if you've picked something where there's too many cons instead of pros, then move on to another item to fix or to change or to adjust. Identify the barriers, talk about strategies for overcoming the barriers, and then consider how other people can offer you help and social support. I think our loved ones, and by the fact that this Narcolepsy Network conference over the years has changed dramatically, where there are many, many, many loved ones of people here with narcolepsy. Back in the late 90s when I first went to Narcolepsy Network conferences, that wasn't the case. So I applaud all of you for that. That's a nice, big, positive change. And I do believe that the people in our lives do want to help us, but they ask perhaps at the wrong time, when we're struggling and when we're grumpy and when you're just too tired to even discuss what might help. So I think we can also be thoughtful as people with narcolepsy and think thoughtfully about how could somebody in my life help me, taking a task off of your responsibilities, changing the how come they always say right after we've had dinner, well, let's go do something, when they should by now know that I'm going to need maybe a nap before I want to go out and do something after eating. And if they know that, I mean, one of the gifts of my good friends, the girlfriends that I worked with at Stanford, we would occasionally have dinner with the girls after work, and everybody would talk, well, where should we go, and what time do we meet? And they would always say, well, let's go someplace near Molly's house because she runs home and takes a nap. And it would be like, I didn't have to say that. I didn't have to strategize that. I didn't have to ask for that, gee, can we not be going north because I live south and that makes more sense. But I realized that those friends really knew me, and they got that that was just part of what I needed to do in order to be able to go out to dinner with them and have fun. Otherwise, if I went to dinner and I hadn't had a chance to take that nap, I'm sitting there thinking like, oh my God, are we really going to keep talking about this and that and the other thing? Dessert? We're ordering dessert? My God, that's another half hour, because I was just too tired to be enjoying myself. And I couldn't have been the same friend when that was what my mental thoughts were. Now, I never said any of that out loud, but I couldn't help but think that that made me less enjoyable friend on an evening out. Okay, so let's practice. Does anybody have a thought about a behavior or a change that they'd like to make in their life? And maybe we can talk through some of these examples of what's a small piece of a behavior change that we might want to set using these kind of goal-setting tools. Does anybody have an example? Has this been helpful? Okay. And if nobody has an example, I'll use something about me. I am not as social as I should be, so I haven't been on a date in 10 years. I know that I should get out more, because I would love to have a life partner to grow old with and spend time with, but I do absolutely nothing towards getting there. So, for me, the path of least resistance is working. So after I nap and I feel good in the evening, I open up my laptop and I do more work. So I've been successful in my work life. But that's kind of all I have. I have a work life and resting up and preparing for a work life. So what can I do to change? It's hard. I'm more comfortable with my path of least resistance. So I could specifically join a group. There's these meetup groups that do hiking. I enjoy hiking. Maybe I can agree to go to a meetup hike on the weekend, every weekend for a month. And, well, yeah. No, I know people do it. I shared an office with one of our doctors who, as I was going on Match, and I told him how funny I thought this whole process was, he decided to go on Match, and 6 months later he was engaged and getting married. So, and I never signed up. So yeah, this is a tough one for me, and so I'm being very revealing by telling you guys that. This one is a hard one for me to change, because my path of least resistance being work has caused me to have success in my work life. So it's sort of like, okay, but now I'm 58. I was 48 last time I thought about this, or maybe even 38. So it's like it's not getting easier. So I know I need to make a change. Does anybody else have an example that we want to talk through? Go ahead. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would suggest on this, goal setting that we talked about, to proactively nap so that you don't have that mental fatigue at 5 o'clock, and that if you get enough of those short naps in, that buys you some mileage that allows you to do things later into the evening. I can relate to that. I think in my younger life with narcolepsy, people used to ask me, let's go to lunch next Wednesday. And an inside reaction would be like, how am I going to feel next Wednesday? You know, and it was really like, is that going to be what if it's a bad day? What if I don't sleep well the night before? You know, what if Wednesday isn't a good day would be my initial thoughts. And I also tend to be way too literal, but I used to sometimes say, yeah, that's a great idea, let's catch up later, and I wouldn't commit to it. Well, eventually you quit asking me to go to lunch because I've kind of not said yes 3 or 4 times. I also learned that many, many people are inherently unreliable anyhow, and that I can just say, oh, of course, let's do it, and 9 times out of 10 the other person cancels, but I'm saying yes more. So I have, in recent years, I say yes to everything, and then I do use my planning backwards to be able to prepare myself, to be able to commit and show up and be there and do things, but it's not always simple, but I'm always doing that. When I'm most disappointed, when I've done everything I needed to do to make that happen so that I can go and meet people at 8 o'clock at night, and then they cancel on me at 7, and I'm like, okay, now what am I going to do? I'm all prepared and ready and rested. Huh? 7 o'clock. Okay. Yes.
But you've been talking about scheduling naps, and presumably you could do that. But everything that you have actually been saying indicates to me, and in my life, that you can't schedule a nap. I can't be sure when I'm going to be tired and out of it, and when it happens, maybe there is time to take a nap or not. But the whole notion of scheduling a nap now, as I keep hearing you, just doesn't make any sense.
So Jerry, I'm going to argue with you. An MSLT, we are 5 times asked to take a nap every 2 hours, and many of us fall asleep. I fell asleep in 0 minutes on all of those naps. So even though we haven't hit the wall, falling asleep, nodding off, our pride gets bruised because we think maybe somebody saw that, maybe they didn't. Was I asleep for 20 seconds or was that 10 minutes? I have no idea. When you wake up, you only know you fell asleep when your head goes like that, right? If you knew you were falling asleep, you wouldn't let it happen by pinching yourself or moving or wiggling. So Jerry, I would argue that if you tried, if consistently you're tired 3, 4, 5 o'clock, but you're saying, how do I plan for that? What if it's 5 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock? I bet you can take a nap at 2 every single day. Because we have narcolepsy, and that's usually how things are. Now, everybody's different, and everybody's routine is different, or their treatment is different, so everybody may have different challenges with scheduling that, but by and large, if you're nodding off at any point in the day and struggling to stay awake, there is a point, an hour, 2 hours, 2.5 hours before that time that you are absolutely positively capable of falling asleep.
In that case, in your experience, and Dr. Mignon, has it been the case that people with narcolepsy do tend to need sleep at particular times? I mean, to me it seems unpredictable, but perhaps you have data to think it otherwise.
Well, there's certain natural circadian dips that it's normal for people to be more sleepy in the afternoon. That's for everyone. I think it's true for people with narcolepsy as well, but everybody's a little bit different. But if you don't have, and this is not always true for people with idiopathic hypersomnia or narcolepsy type 2, and as we've learned, those can flip-flop and perhaps are 2 sides of the same coin in some cases, but everybody's different. I just would argue that I think if you ever struggle with sleepiness during the waking day, that you sometime before that time that you're struggling should be able to take a nap, because to be so sleepy that you're nodding off, your sleepiness is so severe that you can fall asleep sooner. In fact, if I ever lay down to take a nap, so the only thing that can interfere with my ability to fall asleep is sometimes a lot of anxiety. So sometimes when I've tried to take a quick nap before giving a presentation, The yang of the I'm nervous about giving a presentation may prevent me from falling asleep in 30 seconds. But by and large, I think I fall asleep in about 30 seconds every time I lay down to take a nap when I don't have some big thing on the horizon. And everybody's different. So different people may have different capabilities. Mm-hmm.
No, I'm sorry, what I'm concluding from what you're saying is that you need to keep a diary of when you're taking naps and then figure out, figure out a scheduled prep. At this point,
Yep, that might work.
I have no idea when I'm taking naps or not.
Yeah, that's a good plan, Jerry, to be more of a student of yourself and find out when are those times, and then take that nap prior to that time. Yeah, go ahead.
In response to you too, I used to be resistant to the idea of taking a scheduled nap, but I found that as I consistently did it at the same time every day, eventually my body came to adjust, and every day at 1 o'clock I would start to feel sleepy. So your body will also, once you can figure out when your tough times are, will adjust to that time of when you lay down. Your body will expect it every day at that time, and it will become more natural for your body too.
Yeah, it's almost like medicine, right? Yeah.
I just have a logistical question. You mentioned being embarrassed, like if someone saw you do this, which I totally understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a supporter. But I just want to know, just because it's useful, as my daughter, as a lot of these young people get out of college where they have that inherent flexibility of their schedule and are in a workplace. I mean, I understand how your therapist said, and you said it was an aha moment that you don't have to explain. But if you need to take these scheduled naps while you're in a workplace, I mean, do you have a couch in your, do you close the door? Does that arouse suspicion? I mean, it seems like
Yeah, so
there are things to work out there, right?
So I'll tell you two quick stories. I worked at the Stanford Sleep Clinic where there was like 15 bedrooms with beds. I wasn't allowed to go in any of them to take a nap. So I would actually, I had a little blanket in my office, and I had an office where I could close the door, and I would put the blanket to support my head, and I would lay down and take the nap on the floor in my office. When I moved to Jazz, they have this open concept where nobody has an office. So now I don't have an office. We moved to a new building, and they put in sleep pods. That's the last place I'm taking a nap, because the sleep pods are kind of obvious, and it's kind of, I feel like, and I felt this way even in my earliest narcolepsy days when I had a boss who had a back office with a couch, and he actually worked in a different city, and I had permission to use that back office anytime. That same hall that I would walk up and down 5 or 6 times a day, when I was walking to take a nap, I had this irrational feeling that alarms were saying, Molly's going to take a nap, Molly's going to take a nap, because I was ashamed of it. I was ashamed of appearing to be less than. I learned to look around and realize that my coworkers, Joanne used to shop every single day, and her lunch was always an hour and a half. Jamie used to call her fiance and talk with him on the phone, and I wasn't doing those things. That I finally had to realize that those naps, when I went back to that back office, even though I felt shame about it, I had permission to do it, nobody was upset about it, it was me who stopped me from doing that. And when I finally looked around and I thought, well, everybody else is wasting time in various different ways. My nap is so inconsequential compared to the time that everybody else is wasting that I learned to lose that shame around it. But back to where I am now at Jazz, they have these nap pods. Well, guess what? Is anybody in the room here from Jazz? I go to the nursing mother's room because that is more private and nobody knows. And there's not a bed to lay down on, but there's this comfy chair for the nursing mothers, and I look at my phone, I lay it on my chest, I fall asleep, and every time I wake up and I think, oh, it's been too long, because I feel so great when I wake up from a nap, and most days it's 9 to 11 minutes. And so for me, that's my superpower. If I can go into that nursing mother's room, there are people who leave to go to the ladies' room who are gone more than 9 to 10 minutes. So that is one of the ways. So some people When we first moved to this brand new building, before I found the nursing mother's room, the first day I went down to my car in the parking garage. So I think there are ways to find places. Work should provide an accommodation and a place to go. I know that's more simply said than done. I know with kids, I always felt so bad when they could go take a nap, but they had to go to the nurse and ask permission and find a room, and all of that sometimes can be so activating that you actually then, it's like, I'm not as tired as I thought I was. That's why when I was at Stanford and I would just pull that little pillow and lay down on the floor, and that decision was made and accomplished all in about 30 seconds of closing my door, that those were the quickest naps, because I would make those decisions just as I was having that sort of feeling of sleepiness, versus if I had walked around and said hello to a few people and been more activated in a different way, I might have lost that sleep inertia that I was feeling. So I think the more simply we can do that. Is our time up? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, guys, but I hope this has been helpful and it gives you some ideas of how to think about things.